Welcome to the Healing Journey with your host, Dr. Kate Olin. Join us for another episode where we create a safe space to engage in a vulnerable discussion that pertains to all aspects of healing. And now your host, Dr. Kate Olin.
Welcome to this episode of The Healing Journey. Today, we are exploring a topic close to my heart, healing masculinity, with two of my favorite friends. Now, one of my female listeners asked me why me, as a feminist, would choose to spotlight masculinity so early in the show. And my answer is simple. This is not about men versus women. It's about all of us together navigating the generational shifts that have reshaped gender roles and expectations. I think we're living in a time where loneliness, especially among men, is being called an epidemic. And I think that much of that comes from how quickly the expectations have changed. In just a few generations, women entered the workforce in full force. And as a female business owner, I can tell you that I am still feeling the pain and the pull of those traditional responsibilities as a mom, partner, and a daughter. Even knowing logically that I cannot do it all, that old quiet pressure still remains inside of me. But I think one of the big differences is that women talk about this. We are still forming our tribes. We talk about the mental load, the work-life balance struggles. And when I take a step back, I see that my male colleagues and friends are carrying some of these similar burdens, but they just have fewer spaces and places to be able to voice them. And many of them are still feeling like they need to be the protectors and the providers, while also at the same time trying to honoring women's independence, our newfound autonomy that we can provide for ourselves. It can be a tough balance for both men and women, but men are not always really encouraged to speak how they feel. And if, maybe we dive a little deeper and say, yeah, I think there is more encouragement for that, but I think there's still this residing resistance to open up and be vulnerable, because that might not feel very manly. So today we are going to open up this conversation. We will talk about fatherhood, what it means to be a dad, especially to daughters, and how even simple things like shared physical activities can strengthen bonds. In the book, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, Meg Meeker writes that a father's love sets the tone for a girl's self-worth. In other words, the way a father shows up, that can be his presence, his words, his boundaries, they all shape the way a daughter sees herself, makes choices, and relates to the world. And beyond parenting, we're going to ask some bigger questions like, what does it mean to be a man searching for meaning beyond producing and providing? What does it mean to find value simply in being? These are questions that both men and women wrestle with, but I believe we need to start holding more space for men to explore these issues openly. I'm so grateful you're here with us for this conversation. But first, before we dive in, I want to tell you just a little bit more about our sponsor, Thrive Everywhere, an online platform designed to make healthcare simple. With Thrive Everywhere, you can quickly find the right provider by searching services, diagnoses, or specialties provided. And if you're a clinician, it's never been easier to build your practice and focus on what matters most, caring for your patients. Take the stress out of navigating healthcare and visit thriveeverywhere.com. Today on The Healing Journey, we will be discussing healing masculinity. I have two guests I'm very excited to introduce you to. First, I'm going to introduce you to my dear friend, Doug. Doug isn't just a longtime friend. He's someone I've chosen as family, and he's the godfather to my children. One of the things I admire most about him is his lifelong commitment to being a good man and showing up for others with generosity and kindness. Over the years, he and I have shared many deep and meaningful conversations about many things, but including sexuality, gender roles, and what it means to grow and evolve as a person. I'm truly honored to bring him into this space today. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
Yeah, so excited to have you. Can you do me a favor and just so our audience has an idea of your perspective, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are and the stages of life?
Yeah, so I'm a three-time dad, raising two girls and a boy. On my personal life, I am a four-time Ironman. I love physical fitness, challenging myself to things that I think would be impossible without hard work. I love creating, building things, with whether it be woodworking or painting murals. Professionally, I'm an IT director where I help build the cloud. So I'm plugged into a lot of the technology revolution that we're having today. And I'm very interested in how we tackle this topic, especially given that I'm raising two girls and a boy, trying to figure out how we navigate the world of parenting, especially with the new challenges that we have.
Yeah, I love the fact that you bring up there are some new challenges here. I think lately, with everything going on in the world, there's been lots of conversations about masculinity and toxic masculinity and how we can break some of those old habits. So I'm glad you're here to help us. Let me also welcome another friend, Jake Sebok. Jake and I first met a few years ago when he came to my office to get some myofascial release. At that time, he shared with me that he was going through a divorce. And I just remember being struck by the poise and composure with which he spoke about such a difficult season. I was really impressed because I know I didn't handle it that well when I had to go through my divorce. But from there, a friendship quickly grew, and we have been dreaming about collaborating ever since then. So more recently, Jake launched his own business, Modern Manhood, with the mission of helping men discover deeper meaning and fulfillment in their lives. I'm so excited to have you here today, Jake. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
This is super. It's a long time coming. So, like
it's
you
been
said,
a long time. We've been talking about doing something together for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about
Well,
yourself, Jake.
Absolutely, yeah. So I am a father of three now, living life with my partner Elizabeth, and we are just going through it. We're experiencing life and all the chaos and joy that being parents brings. I'm, building a business at the same time, so things are busy, but at the same time, we're feeling full, fulfilled and excited for what life has to offer.
That's right. And Jake, when you're not working and raising kids, what other things do you use to fill your time?
So I'm also a level 2 CrossFit trainer. So I do some coaching at a local gym and have a ton of fun just doing CrossFit workouts with a friend most of the days of the week. And yeah, I love to grill. I love to play guitar, stuff like that.
Yeah. Excellent. So, well, let's dive in. And I think one of the things that kind of struck me as you guys were introducing yourselves is that I know both of you are very dedicated to the physical challenges that you engage in. Do you think that's something that contributes to your own sense of masculinity?
Yeah, so I think I came from, I have a very good mentor in my father. He was volunteering for children who have muscular dystrophy my whole life. I don't remember a time where he wasn't volunteering. And when I got to be old enough, I got to volunteer at the same summer camp. And I heard from kids at the time, but they were older than me in some cases. I was 15 years old, and at the time, kids can come in summer camp up to 21 years old. And these kids, and in some cases adults, had debilitating physical diseases, and they would tell me that, hey, they would never be able to run a 5K or do a marathon or do these physical things, I felt at that moment that I was wasting opportunity that I was given with my physical body to use it to its extreme purposes. And that set a fire under me. And I think it did help channel some of the energy you have as a youth from 15 to, into your mid 20s, where you want to physically express yourself and prove that you have worth and that you can be up to the challenge for things. And a lot of times that's not directed appropriately to things. And so I do think, it helped me mature as a person, but really not from a perspective of masculinity as much as trying to honor the things that I feel like I was given in this world and not wasting the opportunity that and the privileges that I was.
Wow, what a beautiful tribute to the work that you've done with MDA that I know that you and your dad have been doing ever since you were a kid. That's awesome. Now, more recently, I know you've taken a dive into jujitsu. Has that framed your thoughts about activities or exercise or your strength?
Well, actually, this is kind of interesting because I think it gets into this whole topic about masculinity and what it means to be a concept of a boy or a girl on the full spectrum of things that people can be born disposition to. It started really with me thinking I'm going to be raising two girls. My two oldest are girls, and hearing from other women talk about how they can be intimidated, scared of men. And I remember hearing, no, I walk into a boardroom, I'm not scared of any other men in the room. And thinking of that, my daughter's in that position. When they walk into a room full of men, are they going to be intimidated? Would they be something other than themselves because of that? And so it actually started with me getting the girls engaged in jiu-jitsu and watching them through it, seeing girls in a male-dominated sport, especially when they're little, there's no differentiation between boys and girls. They do jujitsu, they play jujitsu, they wrestle together. And oftentimes my daughters who were smaller would be paired with larger men, I shouldn't say big, but boys, and watching those boys and how they interact with the girls and wanting to assert themselves over the girls. And then eventually watching them be able to push back and provide levels of defense and even offense against these boys was really helped me understand who they are as people, how they deal with struggles, how they deal with frustrations. But then it also realized that I'm disconnected from that experience. Growing up, I played baseball and rugby. These are team sports. And I really didn't know what it felt like to be matched one-on-one with a person, having competition be so intimate like that, having your failures be your fault and own those failures, and then learn from them. And so I eventually got my son into jiu-jitsu, and then I got into it. And then I thought, it's kind of funny. I thought, well, I'll get into it so I can share this thing with them, but also I'll help coach them. And then I just learned as I got in jiu-jitsu, just how good they are and how little I. And so there's no coaching that they watch me and point out all the things I do wrong, which I think that helps bond us a little, because although they may see me as their father, they also see me struggle and see me lose, see me win, and get to see how I cope and deal with those situations so that maybe they can learn from that themselves when they go through those competitions.
So what I'm hearing is you're trying to lead by example, but you're also seeking out experiences for your girls to grow their own self-worth and confidence.
Yeah. My two daughters, one of them who is older, naturally was gifted at jiu-jitsu. She just got it and she's competitive. And my middle daughter is not as competitive. And I would watch my middle daughter sitting mere feet away from her with watching a larger boy put his elbow into her neck and put all of his weight on her, and to see her start to tear up, and me as a parent thinking, I need to step into this. I should not be witnessing this. I should be part of solving this problem for her, but holding myself back to think, let's see how she deals with this. And she wasn't able to get out. The round ended and she had tears in her eyes, and she stood right back up and she shook the kid's hand and she moved on to the next match. And I would have never learned that about my daughter had I not witnessed it and stood back and let that develop. And then afterwards I said, hey, let's go talk to the coach. How do we deal with that? What move do we do so that we can get out of that situation next time? And now I believe she knows if she gets stuck in hard situations, there are ways out, and there's things that she can do. And I hope those are life lessons. Those struggles become things that they know when they're stuck in hard spaces, whether it's physical challenges or mental challenges, that they know they're up for it and they're ready to meet those challenges. And sometimes they just need the space to go do that. And as a dad, I need to give my kids room to be vulnerable and be in those tough situations and learn what it's like to struggle. And that's another thing with parenting is we have to put our kids in situations where they will struggle. And hopefully as parents, we can do that in a safe way, in an effective way. But we shouldn't shy away from putting kids in those situations, because oftentimes those are situations.
Well, and regarding the topic today, masculinity, holy cow, I can't, as a parent, I'm a parent, but I'm a mom to two boys. And here you are, a father to girls and boys and a boy. But also I want to claim for a second that the situation Doug was describing is my goddaughter, and I'm very proud of her. She's an incredible young woman. But I can't imagine the challenge of feeling protective and wanting to rescue her, while at the same time, here you chose to let her learn from this experience. That had to be hard.
Yeah. And, to take it back to masculinity a little bit, with my son, he doesn't have those competitive desires. And he goes through jujitsu just as much as my daughters go. And he doesn't really compete in jujitsu. When he gets in competitions, he can get incredibly frustrated, and he doesn't necessarily have the tools yet to regulate his emotions. And so you can watch him just break down in tears, and just him getting, dominated physically and then not knowing what to do to get out of it. Instead of, in some ways I can see my daughters, they've learned to sort of dig down deep and figure out ways to get out. My son becomes isolated. He gets overwhelmed by those emotions. And so the path that he is taking is much different than my daughter's. And, I can almost see in my daughters, they take this more traditional masculine approach where they want the competition. They want the biggest dog in the room for them to go after, where my son doesn't have. And I think that's okay. He may develop it as he gets a little bit older. He's about 10 right now. So as he grows older, he may, as he hits puberty, he may come into those feelings and those emotions. But today he doesn't have those. And I'm not trying to elicit those things. I think they'll come naturally. And it's my job to help foster them when they come. And I also do think it's good for him to be in these wrestling matches, these jujitsu matches with girls, and experience what it's like for a girl to really know what they're doing and get the best of him. And then him be able to internalize that, to say, this isn't a threat to me. It's really the sport, and I'm learning how to work through that. And I hope that pays dividends later on, is that oftentimes with being feminine and being masculine, we've recently pitted those things against each other, that you can't be masculine and be feminine, or being feminine takes away from someone becoming masculine, and vice versa. And those challenges, we need to figure out how we make those things symbiotic again, and not be pitting us against each other.
Yeah, I think those are some really great points. And I don't know if you know this about me, Doug, but my junior year of high school, I was the manager for our wrestling team. And it was me and all the dudes. And I thought it was fascinating. I really believe that those one-on-one competitions, those are the true athletes. That takes grit. But I do remember at that time, it was brand new. There was a girl in the district who was wrestling, and it was the big hubbub. And, as a child, there was all kinds of scuttlebutt about what kind of a girl would want to be doing that. And I remember taking that to heart because I was the kind of girl who wanted to do that, but there was no place for me there, and it certainly did kind of affect the way I felt about femininity and masculinity for sure.
Well, yeah. And what's really interesting is having the girls from the time that they were 5 be in jujitsu with boys and girls competing all together. My middle daughter went out for the wrestling team and did a season of wrestling. And it was very difficult because that sport is not yet organized to provide the opportunity for girls to be successful. Part of the challenge is that you only put up your best wrestler at a certain weight. And so when they go and meet, my daughter weighed 65 pounds, and there happened to be a boy who was a state champion that also weighed 65. Well, when you're going to the meet, you want to win, you put your best wrestler against their best wrestler. And my daughter, being new to wrestling, wasn't at that level. And so she never got to compete in a meet unless it was some special exhibition over on the side. And the whole season, she'd go to practice all week long, go to the meets on the weekends. And every time I said, you're going to sit on that bench here and cheer everybody on. As soon as they come off, you're going to give them high fives. And she said, well, why do you keep making me do this? I don't even get a chance to go. Well, then she does get a chance to go in an exhibition match on a side mat. And when she gets done, there was no one there. There was no one there to high five her. There was no one there to give her encouragement. And I could see her being dejected because now she felt like I've given everything to this. She's still learning it. It's her first time doing it. And it really made her feel like she was not part of the team. And it's hard to learn something when you don't feel part of that group. And so while I think that was a great experience for her, wrestling in particular as a ways to go to figure out how they can provide opportunity for success for females in those sports.
Yeah, I agree.
It is so cool to, have that perspective of having kids. I mean, seriously, becoming a father changed absolutely everything for me. I feel like I went from this place of being very egoic, I guess you could say, maybe a toxic form of masculinity. Oh, I'm in sport because I want to prove myself. I want to be the guy who, lifts more than everybody else. That was really the only sport I got into. I got into powerlifting, which later led to CrossFit. And I mean, the stuff that I did when I was younger is exactly why I was on that table meeting Kate, because I was doing whatever it took to lift more than the other guy. And it was purely machismo, ego, just trying to make my own head bigger. But as I've grown, as I've matured, as I've become a father and had a little bit more to live for than just feeling important myself, I started to realize, oh, there's so much in sport that pushes me further. There's so much in sport that teaches me what it is to be in a state of adversity. And you mentioned that, it's good to be in these places where you're being stretched, you're being taken to your limits, or maybe even beyond sometimes. And adversity is a friend. That's what I like to say. And I try to, the lessons that I take from sport, from those places where I take myself to my limit and then find out that my limit was not actually where I thought it was. And I grow and I expand and I become something that is, bigger than I thought I was before. Those are the moments that I can then take back into fatherhood, and I can introduce adversity intentionally in a sort of, responsible, closed circuit sort of way to my kids. And I can watch them and I can say, okay, go ahead and try. They say, I can't do it. I say, go ahead and try. Dad's here, and I gotcha. If you fall, I'm here. And they try and they see that, oh my goodness, I can do it. And that's just such a really cool thing, because I read somewhere, that there's this sort of war or battle drive. in a man that, wants to defend. It wants to aggress. It doesn't really have a place for the hunting or the battle that it once had. And so sport is really an arena in which we can express those latent desires within ourselves so that they don't come out as rage or something like that in an inappropriate manner. And we're actually taking that and we're alchemizing it into something that turns us as men into better leaders who are more capable of, teaching others and passing that baton down the generations.
Yeah, I think of it as I call it manufactured struggle. And our kids are well taken care of. They're fed. They have opportunities to go to school. They have clothing. They have a roof over their head. And I always cherish the things in my youth that got me to the point of struggle. And not all those things my kids have access to, and that's a good thing. Like they're not going to need to have they've never had a struggle. Like I don't know if you heard that. Like when you grow up poor and you're eating what you can because it's available, not because it's nutritious, but because you just need something in your stomach. They don't have that, and so there's many ways to do it. But one of those ways to manufacture that struggle is through sport. How do you handle failure? How do you handle rejection? I know how it feels to work your hardest and to still fail. And then that brings a sense of humility and understanding as to how you approach different things, and introducing that to the kids. I think it's been just as fun as trying to hit those personal bests myself or trying to do my own accomplishments. And so now whenever I'm doing things, I do think like, how am I setting the example? Maybe I'm not going to ever be able to hit those PRs again. But how do I set the example for my kids as to what it means to succeed and maybe what it means to be part of a group, a belonging, can succeed together, be part of a team and be part of a community, so that they know what those communities are like. And then I know one thing that may come up is they talk about this loneliness epidemic, in men, but also across society. And we've lost third spaces, we've lost communities, we've lost the ability to come together outside of the internet. And I think sport and hobbies in general create that space, and we need that for men and young women, particularly men, because it gives those young men a way to learn how to fail, I call it playing bumper cars. You need to, at a young age, be able to bumper car off relationships and failures and successes, and feel like there's a bit of safety rails so that you're not going to go completely off. But those are gone today. And as we make mistakes, they're either highly publicized or they're documented. Like I know, Lord, had I had video cameras on me every at bat that I ever took in baseball, and as I make mistakes or I miss the catch, and all of a sudden it becomes a blooper on somebody's TikTok channel, that'd be tough. It isolates. And so we've got to figure out ways to create those environments where it's okay to succeed or fail, whether it's in sport or otherwise. And that it's all about the journey that we're on and how we learn from it, versus the events that actually had to take place, right?
So I think what I'm hearing is, where the conversation naturally has kind of flowed is we are talking about physical, athletic, sport competition, and how those are tools to examine our roles. And I think we're in this beautiful time. Growing up, I was a female athlete, and that did affect how I felt about my role, my gender role, a little bit. But we're in this time now where we have professional women's sports that are getting lots of traction. And I think that's really great. Generally speaking, men are stronger and faster,
And I mean, that's just biology. Okay. But there's an arena for women. And I think that it's great that we have these female role models out there for the girls to see that there is value and worth in what we're doing. And I really love that. Another little theme that I wanted to pick out here that I'm hearing from both of you is that your physical challenges for yourself carry over into how you are trying to prepare the next generation with their emotional intelligence. Jake, is there any examples or challenges you have in that arena with your blended family and how you're trying to showcase to them how to navigate these issues?
Yeah, emotions, the
Emotional intelligence.
scape.
It is so important, we've learned, but man, I feel like our generation is trying to learn our own emotional intelligence while also helping the next generation, right?
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, I've heard it said that intelligence is really how many times you can chop up a topic. And that determines how fluid you can be, how agile you can be in navigating that environment. And that's really what it is with emotions as well. I think specifically for men, there is a difficulty in navigating that emotional terrain simply due to a lack of vocabulary for emotion. And, there's this phrase, name it to tame it. And I couldn't possibly agree with that more because, I have a background in linguistics. And when I was in school, we read this study, and it was about perception and the language that we have. And we looked at a particular dialect of Russian, which doesn't actually distinguish between blue and green. And when you would put a color spectrum in front of these people, they really couldn't determine where blue stopped and green, ended, like where the distinction was. But if you went to particularly a group of American females, they could tell you not just where red ended and pink began, but where it was mauve and where it was, these different shades. And it was specifically, they determined based on makeup culture and the ability to have so many different shades that they became sensitive to and aware of the distinctions. So when I think of emotional intelligence and leadership in my family, for me, it's really becoming familiar with and naming my own experience. When I can start to look at the difference and say, am I feeling shame right now? Or am I feeling guilt? And say, okay, shame is this feeling of I'm bad because of who I am. Guilt is this feeling of I'm bad because of what I've done. Those are very different things.
Hmm.
And the way that I reflect them back on me and then project them out onto the world around me determines the way that I act and navigate relationships in the world. So as I become aware of those things, I begin to model them differently in my family. And then because I found them to be very valuable in my life, I can then start to have conversations with my sons. And I can say, what are you feeling right now? And usually the answer is, I don't know. And if I do get an answer, it's sad, mad, happy. But then we can start to branch out and we can start to get into the shades and the hues of these base emotions. And my thought is, if we can start that young, then they won't have to overcome some of the obstacles that I did in my second and third decades on this earth.
Absolutely. I think very recently, this is a recent, I don't know, discovery in my brain. I don't know. When I was reading about how emotions drive our behavior, it's such a simple, yeah, of course they do. It's so simple, but it took me this long to realize that very strong connection between how I feel and how that causes me to act. Now, I have a question for both of you, since both of you are men and I am a woman. I'm wondering, growing up, what was the rules, written or unwritten, for you in displaying your emotions?
Yeah. Well, they were mostly unwritten, but I think that, we receive these sorts of messages from our immediate social groups and also the larger social group around us. And, boys and girls both receive messages about what they're supposed to be, the expectations that are placed on them. For boys specifically, for me in my experience, I was always supposed to be strong. I was always supposed to be smart. And the correlate to that is I was never allowed to show weakness. I was never allowed to show ignorance. Ask a question betrays me, doesn't it? It shows that I am not, the smartest person in the room. So what do I learn? I learn to suppress. I learn to be quiet. I learn to do these different things. And for me and my, family, I was also kind of taught, don't show anger, don't show sadness. You are the one who needs to hold this group together. You're the one who needs to make sure that everyone else in the room is happy. What's really interesting about that, whenever you sort of default to this compulsive happiness, is that you start to lose touch with and alienate the aspects of yourself that don't conform to that role. So it was honestly decades of, pretending to be something and then starting to identify with that later had to be deconstructed in adulthood.
Unlearning those habits is the highest form of learning. I have been told by my mentor, John Barnes. I mentioned him in previous episodes, but I think it's so true. Now, I want to just touch on a couple things that you mentioned. I think it might be a good time before the episode. I was looking into definitions. And the definition of masculinity itself, qualities or attributes as characteristics of men and boys. And you mentioned a couple, they gave some 5 examples of masculine qualities. Number 1, strength, right? 2 is courage, independence, leadership, and assertiveness. So just keeping in mind that those are some of the examples of what it means to be masculine.
This is what's interesting to me is there's an intersection here that I don't necessarily think there's boys and girls, from a gender perspective. It's a spectrum of things, and you may grow up thinking or being pressed upon to be a man, right? Now, you may have inner feelings that naturally occur that may validate that. I know whenever I was a teenager, I did feel like I wanted to assert myself in things. I felt naturally that I wanted to be the leader of a group, that I wanted to defend myself, and I wanted to be an attractive mate. I wanted people to like me. I wanted to be in the in group. And those are things I just felt natural. Like, I didn't make a choice to feel those things. I just felt. And what happens in society is how we manifest those things then gets directed by society. So you need to be able to, instead of that thought of protectiveness, it gets really manifests as aggression. Although I truly love my dad, he was a great mentor to me. He and I had a bit of a fisticuffs, and I got kicked out of the house because I just really felt like anger, and I wanted to let that out, that I'm a man. He can't talk to me in these ways. And it was my immaturity, but it was this concept of being a man that was driving that.
About how old were you at that time, Doug?
I was 18 or 19. And it was a period of a lot of conflicting emotions happening. And a lot of it's driven by, I do believe, driven by, my hormonal changes. And you say those traits that society thinks a man should be. And I do think those are like what we put in this box of masculinity. But we have an opportunity as society to manipulate that box, that my feelings of wanting to have aggression can come out as more productive to society, as being protective, in proactively seeking out people who are put in disadvantaged positions and protecting them. And being strong means when you see somebody who is being taken advantage of, or you see a situation where somebody is weaker than being pressed upon by somebody stronger than, then having the strength to step in and be encouraged to protect people, or the concept of honesty and integrity of being a man, that instead of that being this shell that I put around myself and I project out in the world that I am a great person and I'm honest, instead truly being motivated by having honest, frank discussions about who I am, how I communicate, talk to people. These are opportunities for us to try to take this societal concept of being masculine and putting them into ways that are productive for society. And just as we did, I think of an example of a bully. I know whenever I was in school, middle school particularly, if it were bad, I called it gay. I would make fun of people, and I'd make fun of people because they were different than me, or I was allowed to make fun of them because they weren't as popular or as strong as me. And I think really, if you look at that example of what's going on in schools today, kids would never think to call bad things gay. Kids don't. The anti-bullying campaigns in a lot of ways has worked. That kids are more accepting of each other, and we can think of that concept of how we progress in society and apply those to concept of masculinity, so that it's a more positive shapement of these feelings that people naturally feel, and gives them outlets to express them in very positive ways for society, that doesn't diminish from people feeling like they want to be feminine, or doesn't diminish from people that don't feel either of those. We can say, hey, I have my feelings, and here's a positive way I can project those feelings on the world. And I can stand on my own 2 feet behind those concepts without taking away from it.
Yeah. I love that you talk about it being a spectrum. And I think that's something that it's relatively new to society, discussing the spectrum of sexuality. In the middle, you have maybe agender, you have transgender, cisgender, and everything in between. And I know that some people get uncomfortable talking about that. And I mean, anytime we introduce something new, there is some discomfort. So I'm so grateful to be able to discuss this with you guys, because I think these are important things to be talking about.
Yeah, I know whenever I talk to my wife, she's in a lot of ways a teacher for me, and a source of education. And, it can be difficult because we both try to be feminist, and I don't necessarily know the definition of what that means and how to be helpful on that journey. And it's interesting because we'll have very conflicted conversations where she'll talk about how we need to change so that people can understand what it really means to be a feminine and be a feminist. But there's also challenges where I think about masculinity, and I don't think that we should shy away from how young men feel. We should certainly direct it, channel it in productive ways, but I don't think I should shame a young man because he feels these things, because it's just natural. It just comes out. And so those things can be pit against each other. And I think recently people have done a great job pitting these things against each other. Mm-hmm. And you have to be a feminist at the cost of being masculine. You have to be masculine at the cost of being feminist. And we focus on the toxic traits of each of those. And while they're not equal, we butt them against each other. And really, we should say, this is a partnership, and it's enabling each other. And men who feel that they want to be masculine should be enabled to do that in a productive way. And women that feel they want to be feminist, or even boys that may feel that way, they should be encouraged to do those in productive ways for society. And we have the power to do that. It's just a matter of being intentional in it and putting thought towards when I feel this as a certain person, what's the positive ways that I can put that in action in my life and steer away from some of the negatives.
I'm so glad you brought up some of these points. This is exactly why I was so excited to have this discussion with you two, because I do consider myself a feminist. I do. And I do think that women have some challenges to face, and we always have had more challenges. But that's for a different episode. But as a feminist, I also have seen this struggle in some of my close male friends with how to be respectful to women, but also how to be a man. And I do think there's you brought up the loneliness epidemic, and I do think it's a hard time for men right now because of the evolution of feminism. And I want to be clear. I support equal rights for men and women. But it's a delicate conversation. I feel myself almost stumbling over my words right now, trying to be empathetic to the men who are grappling with this. And, I read a chapter in John Barnes's book. The book is Healing Ancient Wounds, and he has a chapter on embracing femininity and how he had to embrace some femininity. And I brought this up with one of my patients who's a man who works in a predominantly female role, but he is a man. And he said, you got to be careful. Where I come from, country boy, you tell me I'm embracing my femininity. Those are fighting words.
Mm.
But when you get down to the nitty gritty, if you read through it, it's not about being a girl. It's not about being a wuss or what other negative word might come to mind to call someone weak. But it's about respecting yourself, the dichotomy, and making sure to not just embrace feminine or masculine, but creating space for both.
I think that you just opened up a big can right there, which is truly beautiful. And that's that, Doug, you mentioned and you created this sort of separation between what it is to be a man and what it is to be masculine. These are, separate things. And the truth is that every single person who's ever been born, this is the way I like to view it, is completely infinite. We're born with everything. And the ego, the identity that we've sort of created for ourselves is like shining a flashlight in a dark room. And the thing that we think we are is the stuff that we can see within the glow of that light. And it's going to hit some things that are either primarily feminine or primarily masculine, but it's not all masculine and it's not all feminine. And the truth is, we are also the things that are not in the glow of that light. And when I view out my eyeballs and I see that which is feminine, I would consider myself a primarily or majorly masculine person. When I see that which is feminine outside me, it's actually reflecting back to me the feminine nature that I have within myself. It's sort of the or disidentified nature of who I am. When we look at the systems that we live in, they have been primarily male dominated. These patriarchal structures have created a system that is unbalanced. And so I think a lot of this, sort of feminist movement, what it's really calling out is saying, hey, there is deep imbalance here. And anytime that happens, when that pendulum is way too far to one side, we swing super hard to the other and we say, hey, look, here's the other side. And ultimately, where I think we're seeking to end up is somewhere in that middle ground where we're saying neither is right, neither is wrong, but both have to be held in balance in order for us to experience a healthy state in which no one is disenfranchised, everyone is empowered. Because ultimately, when we look at the nature of masculinity and the nature of femininity, masculinity is all about ascension. It is straight up. It wants to grow and it doesn't really care how it's going to do it. Femininity is all about expansion, about cultivation. If we look at a patriarchal system, it says, I want more, no matter the cost. Let's just do it. If we look at a feminine system, like an agrarian society that we used to see in, pre-Neolithic eras, it was all about goddess worship. It was all about cultivation. It was all about spreading and cultivating and, really a lot of prolificy, I guess you could say. It's all about life. So the feminine without the masculine is like a womb that will never bear fruit. It's just always going to stay in, sort of maintain. And the masculine without the feminine is always going to forge ahead with no actual direction. And it's when those two come together that we actually see fruitful life for everyone.
And I think that what would be great to change in this conversation is um, one does not subtract from the other. And men are hurt by the patriarchal system. We are hurt because even though we may be at the steering wheel of it, we are not competing fairly. We are not growing ourselves fairly. We're doing it out of unjust means, and that's not healthy for us. And the more I can strengthen people that feel dominantly feminine, the more I can strengthen men to feel capable of those feelings, the healthier that person is. And like you said, it doesn't have to be an either or. It should be an inclusion. But we've, in the conversation, we've separated. We've said we live in a binary world, and you're either a one or a zero. And I think what we should realize is that it manifests in very unhealthy ways, even though men have been orchestrated, and we in a lot of ways we need to be saved from ourselves because we've set up a system that atrophied us. And as Kate, you said, it's real hard for a guy right now. Well, I'm maybe like compared to 50 years ago, things are harder, but it doesn't mean that it's not better. And it's better for us to open up and have these conversations and compete freely, whether that be in thoughts or productivity and jobs and whatever it may be. That's ultimately good for us. And if you're clinging to these ideas that the patriarchy is the way to go, and this is how we need to function, and I have these, regressive thoughts towards having these gender roles in a house that are driven by the physical manifestation of somebody's sex. That's not strength to be. That's not strength in being a person. Even if you say I'm the man, that's not strength. Strength isn't dominating the conversation. Strength isn't telling your wife that she has certain roles. It's strong to be able to be flexible. It's strong to have to follow the leadership of women. It's strong to know when the moment needs it. It's strength to know whenever we need to be in a support role. It's strength to know whenever we need to be more compassionate or empathetic. That's truly where strength comes from. And we need to change the conversation in those ways.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more on that.
Yeah. Right. Really good points. And I think, I just want to, yes, I do think that there are some challenging times for men, especially the men like yourselves who are grappling with these ideas. And I think I'm embracing my feminine nature by being empathetic to that. And just to kind of, come full circle, we were discussing femininity and masculinity, but I had a couple, I looked up the definition of femininity, and some of the examples of feminine nature include nurturing, empathetic, sensitive, and compassionate. And it goes on to talk about kindness and supportiveness and creativity as well. But I think these are what we as a society might consider to be more feminine. But I think, like you said, Doug, if we could create a culture where we are all able to embrace these different aspects without fear of judgment, I think that's the goal of maybe this conversation, but to start the conversation here today.
Yeah. I think that the way that I describe almost what you said there, Doug, is that I say the ultimate expression of mature, sovereign masculinity is grounded presence. And that means presence for the people in my life, for my loved ones. It means presence amidst chaos, amidst a storm. It means presence in leadership, in vision. And so often the impediment, the obstacles on the way to presence are the ego-driven, threatened, judgment-fearing male mind that says, we are in conflict. If you are the way you are, it threatens the way I am. And so it continues to forge forward in a sort of compulsive, reactive sort of way. And I think that if that ultimate present, that grounded presence, is the ultimate expression of mature masculinity, then we can actually look at its opposite to understand the wounds of masculinity. The wounds of masculinity are the need to always be aggressing, the need to always be imposing, the need to always be proving oneself, and the ability to sit back and to realize that someone being the way that they are, that someone stating a belief or an opinion that is different than my own is not threatening me, is actually the sort of pedestal or the plateau where we're actually going to find that balance and be able to grow together.
Yeah, I think there's, the constant drive, that can manifest itself in competitiveness. And I think that you can get stuck in this where you see this in kids today, where if you're going to do something, you almost have to do it to the extreme. Like if you're going to play baseball, you got to be on the select team and travel all the time. If you're going to play soccer, you got to be on the select team, travel all the time. You got to constantly win it. And so we set up these systems where you feel if you are not winning, you're losing. And it's life isn't like that. We know as older adults, we've learned that there's shades of success, and there's success and failure. And it's very difficult, particularly for young men, to be able to see that and be able to put themselves out there. And I think that's also a challenge with the J in particular, because, one of the people I've kind of listened to in some of these conversations, Scott Galloway, talks about how what we need to do to help grow men and continue to grow men. And one of them is give them avenues to fail and to learn what it's like to have that rejection. Because life isn't binary. It's not success or failure. And if I can learn to deal more with failure, I can learn to deal more with acceptance. I grow my empathy. I know what it feels like. And then I'm open to have more of those conversations that I can be more nuanced in my understanding of success and failure. And know that the success of feminine ideas or how we manifest femininity in the world doesn't mean that masculinity exists.
I love that. I love that thought, that there's no winning here. There's no winning. One can't win over the other. We have to coexist. And I believe we need to figure out ways to better coexist. And that's part of why I'm so excited to be having this conversation. So, gentlemen, I want to know what right now is giving you hope about the cultural shifts happening around gender and healing.
Yeah. I think for me, what's giving me hope are these conversations. The more conversations that I have with men, the more I realize that they are identifying, becoming aware of, acknowledging the fact that there has been a misalignment, an imbalance in the way things have been. They may not know the right words to describe it yet, but they feel it within themselves. They're beginning to watch themselves in their relationships with the opposite gender. They're beginning to watch themselves in relationship to their children. And they're saying to themselves, wait a second, I had to sort of heal these wounds that I had from watching my mom and dad when I was growing up. I had to heal these wounds from the way that my parents treated me as a child, maybe I shouldn't impose them on my partner. Maybe I shouldn't impose them on my kids so that they don't have to go through the same healing process that I did. And maybe it starts with me. And that sort of inward focus, I think,
Yeah.
is the beginning of that awareness that breeds the healing.
Yeah. So I'd like to take a minute, Jake, to talk about your new business, because I think, is this a good point to interject here? Like, so
Sure.
yeah, I met you when you were really pursuing your healing journey. And, as I refer you to people, to the men in my life, I tell them, listen, quite frankly, Jake, you're younger than a lot of the men in my life. And I tell them that. I say, he is younger, but I am so inspired by the commitment you made to do your own personal healing. And I think it's so beautiful that you're using that personal healing to try to help others. So modern manhood, can you tell us a little bit about how you operate in your practice?
Absolutely. Yeah. So modern manhood, just right there in the name, stands in contrast to traditional notions of manhood. The traditional notions of suppressing, of being that stoic guy that, is just like, oh, it's going to be fine. That sort of notion was born of a lifetime that required sort of an avoidance, a distraction from what it was that they were experiencing. We are children of veterans who were children of veterans who were children of veterans who were children of veterans. And on top of that, there was a lot of scarcity. There was a lot of poverty that these generations were coming from. So we've been handed tools and techniques for dealing with the world around us that are from a very different time and age. It's sort of like, Doug, you said your kids have never had a struggle meal, right? And as we as a society are sort of growing and changing, the tools and techniques have to change along with that. So what modern manhood really is it's a movement of men who are saying, you know what? I'm going to be a leader not just for myself, but for the generations that come later. And so we do a lot of this work. I do a lot of work with men who are saying, my dad, he taught me that I needed to suppress. He taught me how to numb out. He taught me how to dissociate. He taught me to, have meaningless sex or to drink my evenings away or whatever it was, just to numb out in front of the TV, something like that. But he didn't he didn't teach me how to be present in my relationships. He didn't teach me to be the first one to go into the darkness, even though you've never been there before, so that you can then lead your kids and your partner through that. And I think that's a lot of what we're searching for in this world, is a connection to our essence of who we truly are and a confidence to be those leaders into the unknown. And so yeah, I work through one-on-one coaching to help men find that leader, that true authentic version of who they are beneath all the roles, responsibilities, obligations, and expectations that society gives us for what a man is supposed to be.
Yeah. Do you have a quote unquote typical client? That comes from my, I guess, business background, wondering like, okay, what does your average or typical client look like? If people are listening and they are picturing someone in their mind that they want to send to you, what do you think that might look like?
That's a great question. And it's actually really funny because I'm learning that it is not who I thought it would be. You start a business out of passion like this and you think, I want to help the version of myself that I was before I went through this journey. So I started out and I was like, I want to find a 30-year-old guy. He's probably a dad. He's got a great job, but he feels kind of empty. And what I'm learning is that I'm actually working with like 45 to 60-year-olds. That is typically the age range where men are saying, hold on a second. The woman that I've been with for 20, 25 years is about to walk out of my life and I don't know what to do. She keeps telling me that I need to stop solving her emotions and instead just listen to her. What does that mean? And so we'll go in and we'll start to do this inner work to understand, okay, man, well, what is it inside of you that needs to always be solving? Is it a feeling that you're not worthy unless you're working? Is it a belief that you are only what you do and not who you are? Is it a belief that your presence isn't enough? What is that? What's getting in the way? And then also, do you simply just not have the tools that you need? Right. Well, let's talk about some of those tools and get you that vocabulary that you need to be able to do this type of work and practice this sort of presence. So yeah, it's a lot of guys who have, they've developed their career and they built everything that they thought they were supposed to, and then they didn't feel the fulfillment that they thought they would, or guys that are in relationships that they've been in for a long time that are falling apart. But yeah, those are the primary people I'm working with.
Jake, I think that's really interesting. I was thinking as you're talking through solving everyone's problems, and I thought of an example of a mentor of mine who recently retired. And when he retired, he had a project plan of all the stuff he was going to do and all the tasks he needed to accomplish and all the things he's sort of been waiting on for retirement. So he's going to, learn how to play the fiddle, and he structured his day. He thought, well, I'm going to retire. I need to have a structure to my day so I can handle this retirement. And talking to him months into this journey of retirement, he mentioned he had to sort of recondition his thinking, because working so many years in a corporate environment as a leader, it is solving every problem that comes in front of you. It is creating plans to accomplish things. And while it didn't manifest as a masculine thing, that it's constant drive for validation, it's just how he learned how to deal with things. And he actually had to deprogram himself to say, my value isn't tied to my productivity, that I'm okay to take days where I'm just going to reflect and I'm not going to produce. And I think in my own life, I come home from work. I've made a lot of decisions at work. I'm trying to solve problems all day. My brain is on a linear thought process. And when I meet with my wife and we talk over dinner, she'll say, oh, this problem at work is happening. And instantly my work brain kicks in and goes, oh, I need to help solve this problem. It's not because I know better, or it's not even a masculine thing that I'm the leader and she's consulting me. It's really that I'm conditioned to solve, and watching my mentor learn to that you've been programmed to that. You've been programmed to that corporate way of thinking, that MBA mindset of thinking that I need to solve is something we've been conditioned to. And we've got to figure out ways as people, but also a subset as men, to be able to turn that and turn it off or reposition it so that we're able to listen, understand, and then if needed, take action. But I thought that was a really interesting target market that you're going after, because I see that in my life. People are in those positions where really they just need to be retrained of how to think about their lives without work, or maybe they're going through divorce and think of their lives, what's my life without my significant other,
And it is so much of that. You're exactly right, Doug. And then there's this one layer deeper too, which is, you said we have to program our thinking, but it's actually at this core biological level, because I think it was Chris Rock had this joke, and he said that men are the only ones who aren't loved unconditionally. They're only loved if they produce, if they perform. And while I don't think that's true, I do think that it is sort of a cultural narrative that is easy to believe because men believe it about themselves. And what happens? We're biological beings. So if I lose value in my society, then I'm ostracized, I'm cast out. And at a biological level, we learn that is the difference between life and death. So much of reprogramming that thinking is actually reprogramming our genetics to say, hey, you're allowed to lounge on the couch for a couple of hours and read a book that has nothing to do with your work. You're allowed to play a video game. You're allowed to take a nap. and you are still loved and you're not going to die. That sounds really dramatic, but it truly is a message that our cells are believing when we stop solving those problems.
Those generational wounds, I think, run very deep. And, Jake, you launched your business. It's been several months. It was July, maybe a couple months ago.
It was February. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So when you launched, I was so excited because there's no doubt in my mind, you are the man to do this work and to help other men do this work. And I was so exuberant and so enthusiastic, and I was messaging people and texting them about your business. And I got some responses that were almost troubling. Someone took offense, like, "Oh, so you think there's something wrong with my manhood?" I'm like, "Well, oh shoot, no, that's not what I'm saying." But I think that he might have been the only person who said it. I think some of the other responses I got from people came from that same place, though. So what can I do? What can listeners do to help try to get someone on your client list?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing for me. I'll speak for myself, and it's that when you are trying to live up to a cultural notion, a societal notion of what manhood is, you're trying to fit yourself into a finite box. And the second that something else comes in and tries to modify that box, it's very fragile. It starts to shatter. And that is sort of this outward projection. We have to maintain it at all costs. We become very defensive of that. So if you see a defense, it's because it's threatening this identity that I'm presenting, and it's threatening my own notion of who I am.
Exactly.
But when we turn that gaze inward, all of a sudden, what was finite becomes infinite. And for me, the way that I viewed this is that I am not who I think I am. I am not all of the social conditioning. I am so much more than that. And what it became was an epic adventure. It became the greatest adventure of my life to find and discover who I truly am behind all those layers, those roles, responsibilities, obligations that I was conditioned to believe were my identity. And, so much of this, we know it, we've seen it in the stories that we've read, the fairy tales, the story of King Arthur, the Sword and the Stone. There's this moment when something in life starts to feel wrong. For Arthur, it was the moment he pulled that sword out and he went, "Oh, I'm the son of a king. There's something more to my life," right? It was this call into a different realm. And for so many of these men, if they start to feel that disconnection between their family, if they start to feel unfulfilled by the career, or the bigger house, the larger vacations, the faster car, whatever it is, what that is a call to look beyond the external world and back into yourself. And in there, you actually get to become that boy again who gets to go as a knight on a quest. And instead of rescuing a princess, you get to rescue your true self and become the wholest version of who you are.
That is beautiful. I love that thought.
Put that on a poster.
Yeah.
I did more than that. I actually just released a new course. It's called Finding Me, and I call it a modern day quest, because what's cooler than a quest, right? And it's literally a 7-step journey from this place, this notion that I am who I'm supposed to be, into a full realization of who I actually am, and designing and creating a life that person really wants. And you can find that at moderndayquest.com.
And we will have that in the show notes, as well as any other links to Jake, that if you're interested in learning more about him and his practice. Well, gentlemen, I think I have one last question to throw out there for us to discuss to wrap this up. And this is the question I think I'm been most excited to ask, but it's kind of a big one. But it also, well, yeah. So I'm wondering, what do you guys think about the roles that men have in dismantling the patriarchy, and how can women help hold men more accountable? What are your thoughts?
I'll say I think the role dynamic change we kind of hit on earlier is we have to realize that if you do feel this concept of masculinity, you do identify with that, and you are comfortable in that, then you have to acknowledge that the patriarchy is hurting. And we have to acknowledge as men, as people, and I can take this to other dynamics, patriarchy, whether it's racism, whether it's toxic nationalism, all of these things, as Jake mentioned, prevent us from getting to the real us, getting to the real you. And eventually you will learn that by following this dogma, you put yourself into a box. You're going to be and it's not going to be establishing who you really are. I like Jake's take on that we need to be able to free ourselves from these thinkings. And I have to think, I believe it to my core that these systems are shackles on us, and we need to unshackle ourselves. And although that sounds, I guess two-sided, or it downplays the focus on women, it's really not. I don't think it should be the focus. The focus should be on the women. But to enable men to be successful, is you have to think of freeing yourself. And I think of this with the concept. Years ago, I really struggled with the concept of white privilege. Like, I hated the fact that somebody would say that I'm privileged. I've had a hard life, and I couldn't see all these things that people talk about as privilege. And I wished back then, there was a different word for it. It shouldn't be privilege. It should be some other word that is out there that talks about the things that I'm standing on. And I want to be on a level ground, and I want to be born on that level ground. I want everybody to have that opportunity to be on that level ground. And I have to lift people up to make that ground level. And by lifting them up doesn't mean that I'm being taken down. It means putting people together on that level. And I think of that with the patriarchy as well, is we have to seek out and identify where we put people in those holes and begin to pull them out of those holes. And that makes me a better person, because it eliminates the handicap that I put in place. And it will eventually become some concepts that men like, which is iron sharpens iron, and rising tide lifts all ships. If I truly want to be the best version of myself, I need to compete against the best version of everybody else that is not on this deficited life that we put people on. And I also have to know that as my life and my quality of life becomes better, that doesn't mean that others are taken back. We can lift ourselves all up together. And so I'd say that's probably where I think men can help themselves out by understanding they're hobbled, they're constrained by the systems that our earlier generations have set up. And I also think part of that needs to account for those earlier systems and generations. It's a whole nother conversation, but I am on the back of everybody who was born before me. And we think of that oftentimes as a good thing. Like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, but really we could be standing on the shoulders of goblins. And we should acknowledge that there's people that have been in their past that have hurt us. I have lots of racists in my family, and the generations going back that have done very terrible things. And I should acknowledge that. While I don't necessarily know that I'm guilty of all their crimes, I should at least acknowledge that those are there and contribute myself to doing the best that I can to use the privileges that have been given to me by the generations before me to dismantle those things. And that way I can stand on my own as a human and feel like I've left this world a better place.
Wow, those are beautiful thoughts. And I'm so glad to be able to share them with the audience. And I definitely think generational wounds is a newish concept that is being talked about in the mainstream media. And it's something I definitely want to tackle. in the future for sure. So Jake, any closing thoughts on that topic from you?
Yeah, just briefly, I think, it all begins with self-leadership. I think as a man, the way that you can sort of lead other men is by leading yourself, and to begin to acknowledge that the lessons you learned implicitly or explicitly about what a man is are not necessarily true. That it is not weakness to be emotional. In fact, it takes strength to actually go to those places and to model what emotional intelligence looks like. So begin with self-leadership. Secondly, be willing to be the first. I think that leadership for others doesn't always look like doing what they expect you to do. Men listen to other men, especially those men that have proven that they are respectable. If I look at another man that I respect and I'm just going along and all of a sudden I see him, he cries in front of me or something like that, all of a sudden it teaches me at a deep level, not just an intellectual level, that, oh, wow, he feels that too. Because so much of what holds us back is believing that we're unique, that we're the only ones. And so we isolate and we hide those things from others and from ourselves. So don't be afraid to be that model. And then I think you asked, how can women keep us accountable? Women, you have far more power here than you could possibly know. We spent a lot of time talking about masculinity, but femininity, that sacred, sovereign feminine, it is a siren for a man. It is alluring. It will take us to places that we never knew we could go. And it will always raise the bar for us. And there's nothing a man likes more than a challenge. We will meet that challenge and we will take ourselves to new places, to loop it back to the very beginning, to set that bar, to find our limits. We will go just about anywhere that feminine siren calls us to. So what I would say to women is do the same thing. Practice that self-leadership, embrace your own sacred feminine, embody it, and find that agency and that autonomy in and of yourself, because it will make the men in your life step up. Either that or it'll filter them out. So that's what I have to say.
That is advice that I think just is radiating with perfection. I can't think of more perfect advice than for both male and female to look within themselves and embrace what is naturally beautiful. So, gentlemen, listen, I have had so much fun having this discussion with you. Thank you for showing up and being so authentic with yourselves and with our audience. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to The Healing Journey with your host, Dr. Kate Olin. We hope you enjoyed the experience. Please make sure to follow the show so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And until next time, don't forget to take care of yourself.